from Diogo Jota, who died at just 28 years old only days after his wedding, to Emiliano Sala, whose dream transfer ended when his plane vanished over the English Channel, and Marc-Vivien Foé, who suddenly collapsed during an international match in this video. We're looking at footballers who died at a very young age. Stay tuned, because the way a few of them died was truly bizarre. Diogo Jota, of all the names on this list, none feels as raw, as recent, or as cruelly timed as Diogo Jota. When the news broke on July 3rd, 2025, many fans genuinely thought it had to be a mistake. Just days earlier, Jota had been celebrating one of the happiest periods of his life. Liverpool had won the Premier League, Portugal had won the UEFA Nations League, and after years with his childhood sweetheart, Ruth Cardoso, he had finally gotten married. 11 days later, he was gone. Jota and his younger brother, Andre Silva, who was also a professional footballer, were driving through Spain in the early hours of the morning on their way to catch a ferry back to England. Because Jota had recently undergone surgery, he had reportedly been advised not to fly. According to investigators, a tire blew out while their Lamborghini was overtaking another vehicle on the A52 motorway. The car left the road, crashed into the barriers, and burst into flames. Both brothers died at the scene. What made the loss even harder to process was where Jota was in his career. This wasn't a veteran nearing retirement. He was still one of Europe's most dangerous forwards after breaking through in Portugal and helping Wolves establish themselves in the Premier League. He earned a move to Liverpool in 2020. It turned out to be the perfect fit. Over the next 5 years, he scored 65 goals for the club, won major trophies, and became one of Liverpool's most reliable big game players. Whether it was under Jurgen Klopp or Arne Slot, Jota always seemed to deliver when his team needed him most. But beyond the goals and trophies, teammates often described him as humble, hard-working, and completely devoted to his family. That's one of the reasons his death hit so many people so hard. His funeral took place just 2 days later in his hometown of Gondomar. Liverpool teammates, including Virgil van Dijk and Andy Robertson, travelled to Portugal to pay their respects, while tributes poured in from clubs, players, managers, and supporters across the world. Liverpool later retired his number 20 shirt, an honour almost unheard of in the club's history and a reflection of just how much he meant to everyone around him. For many fans, the hardest part wasn't simply that Diogo Jota died at 28. It was when he died. Everything in his life seemed to be falling perfectly into place. He had just reached the top of English football, just won another international trophy, and had finally married the woman he'd spent years building a life with. Then, in a matter of seconds, it was all gone. The next footballer's story feels less like a sports tragedy and more like something out of a mystery movie. Emiliano Sala. In January 2019, Emiliano Sala was living the dream. After years of grinding his way through French football, the Argentine striker had finally earned the move he'd worked his entire life for. Cardiff City had agreed to pay a club record fee to bring him to the Premier League, and at 28 years old, Sala was about to take the biggest step of his career. Everything was finally falling into place. After completing the transfer, Sala flew back to France one last time to say goodbye to his teammates at Nantes and collect some of his belongings. It was the kind of gesture that perfectly summed up the person many people knew him to be: humble, loyal, and deeply respected by those around him. Then he boarded a small plane to return to Cardiff, and he was never seen alive again. As the aircraft crossed the English Channel on the night of January 21st, contact was suddenly lost. Search teams scoured the area for days, but there was no sign of the plane, no sign of the pilot, and no sign of Sala. For a while, nobody knew what had happened. What made the situation even more chilling was a message Sala had sent shortly before the aircraft disappeared. In a voice note to friends, he admitted he was frightened and joked that the plane felt like it was falling apart. At the time, nobody knew those would become some of the final words he would ever send. Eventually, after public pressure and a privately funded search backed by his family, the wreckage was discovered on the floor of the English Channel. Sala's body was recovered days later, but the investigation revealed something even more disturbing. Authorities found that the flight should never have happened the way it did. The aircraft was operating as an unlicensed charter. Flight and toxicology reports later showed that Salah had been exposed to dangerously high levels of carbon monoxide before the crash. Investigators concluded he was likely severely impaired or even unconscious before the aircraft plunged into the sea. The more investigators uncovered, the worse the story became. Questions emerged about the pilot's qualifications, the condition of the aircraft, and the chain of decisions that allowed the flight to go ahead in the first place. Years of legal battles followed, with court cases, compensation disputes, and criminal convictions keeping the tragedy in the headlines long after the crash itself. What makes Salah's death so heartbreaking is how close he was to realizing his dream. He wasn't flying home after a failed trial. He wasn't hoping for an opportunity. He had already made it. The contract was signed. The presentation photos had been taken. The Premier League was waiting for him. He was just trying to get to his new team. He never got the chance. Emiliano Sala's dream ended in the skies above the English Channel. But as heartbreaking as that story was, it wasn't the only time football lost a rising star. In an aviation disaster, Duncan Edwards, when people talk about football's greatest what if, one name comes up again and again, Duncan Edwards. Long before Manchester United became the global giant we know today, Edwards was supposed to be the player who would lead them into the future. He was the jewel of Matt Busby's famous Busby Babes, a team packed with young talent that looked capable of dominating football for years to come. And according to the people who actually played alongside him, he wasn't just good, he was extraordinary. Bobby Charlton, who shared a dressing room with some of the greatest footballers in history, later described Edwards as the best player he had ever seen. Others called him the complete footballer, strong, athletic, technically gifted and mature beyond his years. He seemed capable of doing everything on a football pitch. What's even more remarkable is how much he achieved before turning 22. Born in Dudley in 1936, Edwards joined Manchester United as a teenager and wasted little time forcing his way into the first team. He became the youngest player to appear in England's top division at the time, helped United win back-to-back league titles, and earned 18 England caps while still barely out of his teens. By 1958, many believed he would become one of the stars of the upcoming World Cup and a cornerstone of both Manchester United and England for the next decade. But none of that would happen. On February 6, 1958, Manchester United were returning home from a European Cup match in Belgrade. Their plane stopped in Munich to refuel, before continuing the journey back to England after two failed takeoff attempts. The crew tried a third time. It ended in disaster. The aircraft struggled to gain speed on the snow-covered runway, overshot the end of it, and crashed. 23 of the 44 people on board were killed, including several Manchester United players, club staff, and journalists. The tragedy would become known as the Munich air disaster, one of the darkest days in football history. Unlike many of the others, Edwards survived the initial crash, badly injured but still alive. He was rushed to hospital, suffering from multiple fractures, broken ribs, and severe internal injuries. At first, doctors believed he might pull through. Despite the pain, his determination never disappeared. One of the most famous stories from those days came when he regained consciousness and reportedly asked assistant manager Jimmy Murphy what time Manchester United's next match against Wolves was kicking off. He was worried about missing the game for a brief period. There was hope. Then his condition suddenly worsened. After fighting for 15 days, Duncan Edwards died on February 21st, 1958. He was just 21 years old and became the final Manchester United player to succumb to injuries from the crash. The loss devastated football more than for years. Reyes was one of those players defenders hated facing. Quick, fearless, and incredibly skillful, he could change a game in an instant. He broke into Sevilla's first team at just 16 years old, earned a move to Arsenal in 2004, and went on to build a career that took him across some of the biggest clubs in Europe. But none of that is what people remember about June 1st, 2019. By then, Reyes was in the later stages of his career and playing for Extremadura UD in Spain's second division. After training that day, he got into his Mercedes and began driving along the A300 and 76 highway between Seville and his hometown of Utrera. He never made it home. Also in the car were two of his cousins, Jonathan Reyes and Juan Manuel Calderón. Jonathan would die alongside him. Juan Manuel survived but suffered serious injuries. The cause of the crash was devastatingly simple. Speed. Investigators later concluded that Reyes had been driving at an extremely high speed when a rear tire suffered a blowout. The car left the road, struck barriers, rolled multiple times, and burst into flames. Initial reports suggested the vehicle may have been traveling at more than 220 kilometers per hour. A later official investigation found it was moving at least 187 kilometers per hour when it hit a fence, far above the speed limit. The violence of the crash left almost no chance of survival. News of Reyes' death spread quickly across the football world and left many in shock. Just hours later, tributes began pouring in from former teammates, managers, and clubs. Thierry Henry described him as a wonderful player and an exceptional human being. Arsène Wenger, Sergio Ramos, and Unai Emery were among the many figures who publicly expressed their grief. The sport stopped to remember him. A moment of silence was held before the 2019 Champions League final. La Liga postponed matches. The Spanish Football Federation later awarded him a posthumous gold medal in recognition of his career and contribution to the game. A few days later, thousands gathered in Utrera to say goodbye. His coffin was carried through the streets wrapped in the flags of both Sevilla and his hometown, while mourners lined the route to pay their respects. Reyes left behind his wife, Noelia Lopez, two daughters, and a son from a previous relationship. What made the tragedy even more uncomfortable was the conversation it sparked afterward. Reports emerged that Reyes had previously been cited for dangerous driving on the same stretch of road years earlier. Suddenly, his death became more than a football story. It became a warning, because unlike many of the tragedies on this list, José Antonio Reyes wasn't taken by illness, bad luck, or a hidden medical condition. He was taken by something people encounter every single day: the consequences of driving too fast. Andrés Escobar. This one is different from every other story on this list. Andrés Escobar wasn't taken by illness. He wasn't killed in a crash. He wasn't the victim of a hidden medical condition. He was murdered, and what makes his story so shocking is that many people believe it all started with an own goal at the World Cup. Escobar was one of Colombia's finest defenders and one of the most respected players in the country. He played for Atlético Nacional in Medellín and was a key part of a Colombian national team that many believed could challenge for the 1994 World Cup. In fact, before the tournament began, Pelé had even predicted Colombia would win it. The expectations were enormous. Then, during a group stage match against the United States, disaster struck. A cross came in from the left. Escobar moved to clear it away, but instead the ball deflected off his leg and rolled into his own net, an own goal. The kind of mistake that has happened thousands of times in football history. But this wasn't just any football team, and this wasn't just any period in Colombian history. Colombia went on to lose the match, 2-1, and crashed out of the tournament in the group stage. Back home, frustration quickly turned into anger. At the time, Colombian football existed alongside the influence of powerful drug cartels, illegal gambling, and enormous sums of money connected to the sport. The pressure surrounding the national team was unlike anything most players could imagine. Escobar returned to Medellín, knowing he would face criticism for the own goal. What nobody expected was what happened next in the early hours of July 2nd, 1994, less than 2 weeks after the match against the United States. Escobar was out with friends at a restaurant. As he walked through the parking lot, he was confronted by a gunman and shot multiple times. He was 27 years old. According to reports at the time, the killer shouted "Goal" as the shots were fired, mocking the mistake that had made Escobar a target for blame. It's one of the most chilling details in football history. He had just played in a World Cup. He was married, he had his whole life ahead of him, and he was killed over a deflection. A man named Humberto Muñoz Castro was later convicted of the murder and sentenced to prison, though the full story behind the killing has never been completely settled. For decades, questions have remained about who was truly responsible and whether powerful criminal interests played a role in what happened. More than 30 years later, the case still carries an air of mystery. Perhaps the most heartbreaking part is that only days before his death, Escobar had written an open letter to Colombian fans. Rather than blaming anyone, he urged people to stay calm, move forward, and remember that life was bigger than football. One of the final lines of the letter simply read, "Life does not end here." Tragically, for Andrés Escobar it did. The next footballer's death was the complete opposite. David Astori. Davide Astori did not collapse in front of thousands of fans. He did not die in a car crash. He didn't disappear on a flight or become the victim of violence. He simply went to sleep and never woke up. That's what made his death so difficult to process. Astori was the captain of Fiorentina, one of the most respected defenders in Italian football, and only 31 years old when he died. By all outward appearances, he was healthy, fit, and still had years left in his career. Born in San Giovanni Bianco, Astori came through AC Milan's youth system, but never broke into the first team. Instead, he built his reputation the hard way. He established himself at Cagliari, making more than 170 league appearances and eventually becoming club captain. Successful spells at Roma and Fiorentina followed, and when Fiorentina made his move permanent in 2016, he quickly became a leader, both on and off the pitch. Known for his composure, professionalism, and reliability, Astori was exactly the kind of player teammates trusted. He also represented Italy 14 times between 2011 and 2017 and scored his only international goal during the 2013 Confederations Cup. Then came March 4th, 2018. Fiorentina were preparing to face Udinese's in a Serie A match. The squad was staying at a hotel before the game, and when Astori failed to show up for breakfast, club staff went to check on him. They found him unresponsive in his room. He was just 31 years old. The news stunned Italian football. Teammates, opponents, supporters, and even rivals struggled to comprehend how a professional athlete in apparent peak condition could die so suddenly. Serie A matches that weekend paid tribute, with moments of silence, while Fiorentina's match was postponed as the sport mourned one of its most respected figures. The autopsy later concluded that Astori had died from natural causes related to a cardiac condition. Doctors believed a severe bradyarrhythmia, an abnormally slow heartbeat, had caused cardiac arrest while he slept. Further analysis pointed to an undiagnosed arrhythmogenic cardiomyopathy, a heart disorder that had somehow gone undetected despite the regular medical examinations professional footballers undergo. There were no drugs, no trauma, and no outside factors, just a hidden condition that nobody knew was there, but the story didn't end there. Questions quickly emerged about whether the condition should have been detected during routine screenings. The investigation eventually focused on Fiorentina's team doctor, Giorgio Galanti. Prosecutors argued that warning signs had been missed and that Astori should never have been cleared to play. In 2021, Galanti was convicted of manslaughter, receiving a 1-year suspended sentence and being ordered to pay substantial damages. The case sparked a wider debate across football about the limits of medical screening and whether even the most rigorous tests can miss a silent killer. A few days later, thousands gathered at the Basilica of Santa Croce in Florence to say goodbye. Players from across Italy attended, including Gianluigi Buffon. while crowds packed the streets outside as mourners paid their respects. Chants of "there's only one captain" echoed through the city. Fiorentina honored him in every way they could. The club retired. His number 13 shirt renamed their training ground after him and continued supporting his family, including his young daughter Vittoria, who was only about 2 years old at the time. More than anything, though, people remembered Astori not just as a footballer, but as a genuinely good person. Astori's death showed how a hidden heart condition can remain undetected. The next footballer's story would make that lesson painfully clear. Antonio Puerta. Antonio Puerta was Sevilla through and through. He grew up in the city, came through the club's academy, played his entire professional career in their colors, and became one of the brightest young talents in Spanish football. Tragically, he would also lose his life in a way that forever changed the sport's approach to cardiac emergencies. Born in Seville in 1984, Puerta joined Sevilla's youth academy as a child and spent 14 years working his way toward the first team. By the mid-2000s, he had become a key part of one of the most successful periods in the club's history, a gifted left-footed player capable of playing in midfield or defense. He helped Sevilla win major trophies and earned a reputation for his technical ability, tireless work rate, and what teammates affectionately called his diamond left foot. One of his most famous moments came in 2006, when he scored a dramatic extra-time winner against Schalke in the UEFA Cup semi-final, helping Sevilla reach the final and continue their rise as one of Europe's most exciting teams. Interest soon arrived, from clubs like Arsenal, Manchester United, and Real Madrid, but Sevilla rejected every offer. At just 22 years old, it felt like his best years were still ahead of him. Then came August 25th, 2007. Sevilla were playing Getafe in their opening La Liga match of the season when Puerta suddenly collapsed near his own penalty area while jogging back into position. Teammates and medical staff rushed to help as thousands of stunned supporters watched from the stands. A few moments later, something remarkable happened. Puerta got back to his feet. He appeared to recover, was substituted, and even walked off the pitch by himself toward the dressing room. For a brief moment, it seemed as though the worst had passed. It hadn't. Shortly after reaching the dressing room, he collapsed again. Then again, he suffered multiple cardiac arrests and was rushed to hospital, where doctors fought to save his life. For 3 days, the entire country waited for updates as he remained in intensive care on assisted ventilation. On August 28th, the fight ended. Antonio Puerta died at just 22 years old. Doctors later determined that the underlying cause was arrhythmogenic right ventricular cardiomyopathy, a rare hereditary heart condition that can trigger fatal heart rhythm disturbances during physical exertion. The repeated cardiac arrests had caused irreversible brain damage and multiple organ failure. Spain was devastated, but the tragedy became even more heartbreaking when people learned that Puerta's partner, Mar Roldan, was 7 months pregnant with their first child. At the time, their son Aitor would be born just weeks later. Growing up, never having the chance to meet his father years later, Aitor would join Sevilla's youth academy, continuing the connection between the Puerta family and the club his father loved. Sevilla made sure Antonio Puerta would never be forgotten. The club retired his number 16 shirt, erected a statue in his honor, and continued to celebrate his memory long after his passing. Teammates like Sergio Ramos and Jesus Navas carried tributes to him during Spain's triumphs at Euro 2008 and the 2010 World Cup. His death also had a lasting impact on football itself. It accelerated improvements in emergency medical response, resuscitation procedures, and cardiac awareness across the sport. In the years that followed, those changes would help save lives. More than anything though, Antonio Puerta remains a symbol of potential never fulfilled, a beloved son of Sevilla who seemed destined for a brilliant future, only to have it taken away at 22 years old. Antonio Puerta wasn't the last footballer to collapse without warning. The next player would suffer a similarly devastating fate nearly a decade later. Cheick Tiote. For Newcastle United supporters, the name Cheick Tiote is forever attached to one of the most extraordinary moments in the club's history. He was an Ivorian defensive midfielder, known for his toughness, energy, and relentless work ethic. A player who built a successful career in European football before his sudden death at the age of 30, while training in China. Born in Yamoussoukro, Ivory Coast, Tiote began his professional career with Anderlecht in Belgium before moving to the Netherlands, where he helped FC Twente win the Eredivisie title in the 2009-10 season. Under Steve McClaren, his performances earned him a move to Newcastle United in 2010, and he quickly became a key figure in the team's midfield on the international stage. He earned 55 caps for the Ivory Coast and helped his country win the Africa Cup of Nations in 2015, alongside stars such as Yaya Touré and Didier Drogba. At Newcastle, Tiote became a genuine cult hero over 6.5 seasons. He made 156 appearances for the club and scored just 1 goal. But that 1 goal was enough to secure his place in Newcastle folklore forever. On February 5th, 2011, Newcastle found themselves trailing Arsenal 4-0 at half-time, in what looked like a hopeless match. What followed was one of the greatest comebacks in Premier League history. As the game entered its final minutes, Newcastle had fought back to make it 4-3 and needed 1 more goal. Then Tiote produced a moment nobody expected. The defensive midfielder, who almost never scored, struck a thunderous left-footed volley from outside the penalty area that flew into the net and completed an astonishing 4-4 comeback. More than a decade later, it remains one of the most iconic goals ever scored at St. James's Park. By 2017, however, Tiote was ready for a new challenge. After leaving Newcastle as a free agent, he signed with Beijing Enterprises Group in China's 2nd Division. It seemed like the start of a new chapter. Instead, it would be the final one. On June 5th, 2017, during what should have been a routine training session, Tiote suddenly collapsed without warning. There had been no collision, no obvious injury, and no indication that anything was wrong. Teammates and coaching staff rushed to help as first aid was administered before he was taken to hospital. Despite efforts to save him, he was pronounced dead. Roughly an hour later, he was just 30 years old. The immediate cause was cardiac arrest. In the days that followed, his family traveled to China searching for answers about what had happened. Later reports suggested that hypertrophic cardiomyopathy may have been an underlying factor, the same hereditary thickening of the heart muscle, linked to the death of Marc-Vivien Foé 14 years earlier. Once again, football was confronted with the reality that even elite athletes can be living with conditions they never know they have. Tributes poured in from across the football world. Former managers, including Alan Pardew, Rafael Benitez, Steve McClaren, and Chris Hughton praised his professionalism and character, while teammates such as Yaya Touré, Gervinho, Salomon Kalou, Demba Ba, and Papis Cissé spoke of the shock they felt at losing him. Those who knew him best consistently described him as humble, hard-working, and fiercely loyal. A memorial service was held in Beijing before his body was returned to Ivory Coast. After a reported dispute over funeral arrangements, Tiote was eventually given a military funeral in Abidjan, attended by national teammates, government officials, and hundreds of mourners. He was remembered not only as an important footballer, but as a worthy son of the nation. The next footballer's story contains one of the most haunting images the sport has ever seen. Miklos Ferher. The image of Miklos Ferher's final moment remains one of the most haunting in football history, not because of how he died, but because moments before it happened, he was smiling. Ferher was a talented Hungarian striker whose career seemed to be heading in the right direction. He was only 24 years old when he died, and many believed his best football was still ahead of him. Born in Tatabánya, Hungary, Fehér first made a name for himself with Győri Ato, where his goal-scoring ability quickly attracted attention. He was named Hungary's Young Player of the Year in 1997 and soon earned a move to Portuguese giants Porto. While regular playing time proved difficult to come by there, successful loan spells, particularly with Braga, showed exactly what he was capable of. His performances eventually led him to Benfica, where he began establishing himself as an important player. On the international stage, he earned 25 caps for Hungary and scored 7 goals, including a memorable hat-trick against Lithuania. By the start of 2004, he was entering what should have been the prime years of his career. That future was taken away on January 25, 2004, during a league match between Benfica and Vitória de Guimarães that was being broadcast live across Portugal. Fehér had entered as a second-half substitute and with Benfica leading 1-0, had just helped set up the goal that secured the victory. Moments later, he received a yellow card for delaying a throw-in. As the referee reached for his pocket, Fehér responded with a sheepish smile, a moment that would later become known as the last smile. Seconds later, he bent forward as if catching his breath, suddenly staggered and collapsed backwards onto the pitch. Medical staff rushed onto the field and immediately began CPR, as stunned teammates and supporters looked on. He was transported for emergency treatment, and doctors continued trying to save him for well over an hour. But later that night, Miklos Fehér was pronounced dead. The cause was cardiac arrhythmia triggered by hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, a hereditary thickening of the heart muscle that can remain completely undetected even in professional athletes. Investigators found no evidence of drugs, alcohol, or doping, and medical examinations conducted only weeks earlier had revealed nothing alarming. That was part of what made the tragedy so frightening. By all appearances, Fehér was healthy. The next footballer's story is heartbreaking because of everything he endured before he died. Piermario Morosini. Some football stories are tragic because of how they end. Piermario Morosini's story is tragic because of everything he endured before it did. The Italian midfielder was only 25 years old when he died, but by that point, he had already experienced more loss than most people face in an entire lifetime. Yet despite everything that happened to him, those who knew him remembered a quiet, determined, and resilient person who refused to give up. To understand why Morosini's death hit so hard, you have to understand the life he was fighting to build. Born in Bergamo in 1986, he suffered a series of devastating personal losses while still a teenager. His mother died when he was 15. 2 years later, his father also passed away after a long illness. Around the same period, his disabled brother died, leaving Morosini responsible for helping care for his severely disabled sister. It would have been enough to break many people. Instead, he poured his energy into football. Morosini came through Atalanta's youth system before joining Udinese and making his Serie A debut against Inter Milan in 2005. His career never brought superstar status, but he carved out a respectable place in Italian football through spells with clubs including Bologna, Vicenza, Regina, Padova, and Livorno. Along the way, he represented Italy at every youth level and earned 18 appearances for the under-21 national team. More importantly, he earned a reputation as a model professional. Coaches and teammates consistently spoke about his character, work ethic, and ability to keep moving forward despite the hardships he carried off the pitch. Then, on April 14th, 2012, tragedy struck once again. Livorno were playing Pescara in a Serie B match when Morosini suddenly collapsed in the 31st minute. There had been no challenge and no collision. He simply fell to the ground away from the ball. At one point, he appeared to try to get back up, briefly reaching his knees before collapsing again and losing consciousness. The scenes that followed were chaotic. Medical staff rushed onto the pitch, but questions would later be raised about the emergency response. A defibrillator was available at the stadium, yet reports suggested it was not used immediately. To make matters worse, an ambulance was reportedly delayed because a vehicle was blocking an exit route from the pitch. Morosini was eventually taken to hospital, but he could not be saved. He was 25 years old. Later examinations found that he had a genetic predisposition to arrhythmogenic cardiomyopathy, a heart condition that can trigger fatal cardiac events, even in seemingly healthy athletes. Investigators also identified a scar on his heart, confirming that the underlying condition had played a central role in his death. What followed was years of legal arguments and scrutiny. Prosecutors claimed delays in treatment may have reduced his chances of survival, and several medical professionals were initially convicted of manslaughter, before those rulings were later overturned. In the end, the courts concluded that the circumstances had been chaotic, and that the underlying heart condition remained the primary cause of death. His passing came only weeks after Fabrice Muamba's widely publicized cardiac arrest in England, and intensified concerns about heart health throughout football. The reaction across Italy was immediate. Matches were suspended, tributes poured in, and several clubs moved quickly to honor his memory. Livorno and Vicenza retired his number 25 shirt, while Atalanta dedicated part of their stadium to him. One of the most touching tributes came from Antonio Di Natale, who pledged to help support Morosini's disabled sister after his death. Years later, Gianluigi Buffon would dedicate a Champions League victory to his memory, and an award for the best young player in Italy's Primavera Championship now carries his name. Morosini is remembered not for trophies or fame, but for resilience. He endured the loss of nearly his entire immediate family, carried responsibilities most young people could never imagine, and still managed to build a professional football career. That's what makes his story so heartbreaking. After overcoming so much in life, football was supposed to be his escape. Instead, it became the place where his story ended. The next footballer never got the chance to discover just how far his talent could take him. Junior Malanda. Junior Malanda was one of those players who seemed destined for something bigger. He was part of Belgium's golden generation, coming through at a time when the country was producing talents like Kevin De Bruyne, Romelu Lukaku and Thibaut Courtois. While he hadn't yet reached their level, many believed it was only a matter of time. Strong, athletic, and remarkably mature for his age, Malanda looked like a player with a huge future ahead of him. Tragically, he never got the chance to find out how far that future could go. Born in Brussels in 1994 to a family of Congolese descent, Malanda developed through several Belgian youth systems before joining French club Lille as a teenager. Initially playing as a right back, he eventually moved into midfield, where his physical presence and ability on the ball began attracting attention. He captained Belgium's under-19 side and represented his country at multiple youth levels, establishing himself as one of the nation's most promising young players. His breakthrough came at Zulte Waregem, where he became a regular starter and helped the club finish runners-up in the Belgian Pro League. Strong performances in both domestic competition and the Europa League quickly caught the attention of bigger clubs, and in 2013 he secured a move to Bundesliga side Wolfsburg. The transfer felt like the beginning of something special. At Wolfsburg, he shared a dressing room with players like Kevin De Bruyne and Ivan Perisic, and continued developing his reputation as a powerful, dynamic midfielder. He made 17 Bundesliga appearances, scored 2 goals, and was widely viewed as one of the club's brightest young prospects. Then, on January 10th, 2015, everything changed. Wolfsburg's squad was preparing to travel to South Africa for a winter training camp. Malanda was riding in the back seat of a Volkswagen Touareg, heading toward the airport when disaster struck. The weather conditions were poor, and the road was extremely wet. At some point during the journey, the vehicle lost control, crossed the guardrail, struck a tree, and overturned multiple times. Malanda was not wearing a seatbelt. The impact threw him from the vehicle, and he died at the scene. He was only 20 years old. The driver and another passenger suffered serious injuries but survived. Investigators later concluded that excessive speed in dangerous weather conditions had been a major factor in the crash. No other vehicles were involved. As authorities examined the circumstances, another troubling detail emerged. According to Malanda's agent, the vehicle had reportedly been caught speeding numerous times in the months before the accident, including several incidents involving speeds above 200 kilometers per hour. The football world was stunned. More than 1,000 mourners attended his funeral in Brussels, where traditional Congolese songs and dances accompanied tributes from family, friends, teammates, and supporters. Across Europe, players and clubs paid their respects. Romelu Lukaku dedicated a goal to him. Kevin De Bruyne spoke about losing a close friend. Bayern Munich observed a minute's silence, while messages of support arrived from every corner of the game. Wolfsburg's tribute was particularly emotional. Later that season, during the DFB Pokal final, players wore shirts featuring Malanda's number 19 inside a heart. When Wolfsburg went on to win the trophy, many supporters felt as though they were carrying him with them. The club retired his number, and annual tributes have continued ever since. Phil O'Donnell. There is a particular cruelty to the story of Phil O'Donnell, who died playing for the club he loved, in the town where he was born, with his nephew on the same pitch. He was a Scottish footballer born on the 25th of March, 1972, in Bellshill, Lanarkshire, who died on the 29th of December 2007, at age 35 from left ventricular failure while playing for Motherwell against Dundee United. O'Donnell came through Motherwell's youth system and made an immediate mark, scoring a diving header in the 1991 Scottish Cup final, a memorable 4-3 win over Dundee United that took the club into European competition for the first time. He won the PFA Scotland Young Player of the Year award in both 1992 and 1994. In 1994, he moved to Celtic for a then-record fee of £1.75 million for Motherwell, contributing to a Scottish Cup win and the 1997-98 league title that ended Rangers' run of dominance, though injuries badly disrupted his later years there. After a spell at Sheffield Wednesday largely lost to injury, where he managed just 20 league appearances in 4 years, he returned to Motherwell in 2004, playing alongside his nephew David Clarkson and earning the affectionate nickname Uncle Phil. He became club captain, took on coaching duties, and was in strong form in his second spell. He had earned one senior cap for Scotland back in 1993. On the 29th of December 2007, during the second half against Dundee United at Fir Park, O'Donnell collapsed just as he was about to be substituted, standing alone at the time. Club doctors from both teams attended to him on the pitch for about 5 minutes, before he was taken by ambulance to Wishaw General Hospital. He was pronounced dead at 18 minutes past 5 that evening. Initial reports suggested a seizure, and medics worked desperately to revive him, but their efforts failed. A post-mortem examination confirmed the cause as left ventricular failure, a form of heart failure. It was described as sudden cardiac death, with some reports linking it potentially to hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, though the official findings centered on left ventricular failure. As is so common in these athlete cases, there were no widely reported indications of prior diagnosed heart issues. His death shocked British football. Matches were postponed, and players like James McFadden dedicated goals to him. O'Donnell was a devoted family man, married to Eileen, with 4 children. His daughter Megan later spoke movingly about watching her father die on the football pitch, and the things she missed by not getting to know him. Motherwell renamed the main stand at Fir Park the Phil O'Donnell Stand, and an annual sponsored walk from Fir Park to Celtic Park raises money for the British Heart Foundation, among other charities. His number 10 shirt was afterwards worn only by his nephew David Clarkson for a time. 10 years on, the football community still remembered him. His death a stark reminder of the undetected cardiac conditions that can lurk within even seasoned professionals, and a prompt for greater screening awareness in Scottish football. The next footballer's story contains one of the cruelest twists on this list. Cristiano Jr. The Brazilian forward was just 25 years old when he died in India, moments after scoring a goal in a major cup final. His death exposed serious concerns about player safety and emergency medical preparedness, and 2 decades later, people still point to his case as a turning point for Indian football. Born in Brasilia in 1979, Junior came through the youth system of Vasco da Gama, but never quite established himself as a star in Brazil. After moving through several clubs, he took a chance on a move to India in 2003, a decision that would completely change his career. Far from home, he finally found the success he had been searching for. Playing for East Bengal, he became one of the most feared strikers in the country, winning the league's Golden Boot and helping the club capture major trophies. His partnership with Indian football legend Baichung Bhutia made him a fan favorite, and his goal-scoring form quickly turned him into one of the biggest names in Indian football. By the time he joined Dempo Sports Club in 2004, he was reportedly among the highest-paid players in the country and continued scoring at an impressive rate. Everything seemed to be going right. Then came December 5th, 2004. Dempo were facing Mohun Bagan in the Federation Cup final at Bangalore's Sri Kantirava Stadium. With just over 10 minutes remaining and Dempo already leading, Junior chased a through ball and lifted it over the advancing goalkeeper, Subrata Pal, scoring his second goal of the match. It should have been the defining moment of his career. Instead, it became the final moment of his life. As he scored, there was a collision with the goalkeeper. Junior lost his balance, stumbled, and fell to the ground. At first, many people thought he was simply reacting to the challenge or celebrating the goal. Even the referee initially appeared unaware of how serious the situation was. But something was clearly wrong. Teammates rushed over as Junior struggled to move before collapsing completely. What happened next became the source of enormous controversy. Reports later suggested that several crucial minutes passed before proper medical assistance arrived. He was eventually taken to hospital, but by then it was too late. Cristiano Junior was pronounced dead on arrival. What made the aftermath so disturbing was the revelation that there were reportedly no doctors present inside the stadium, despite regulations requiring medical coverage. There was an ambulance and physiotherapists, but questions immediately emerged about whether the response had been fast enough and whether his life could have been saved. The match ended with Dempo winning their first Federation Cup title, yet the celebrations quickly gave way to shock and disbelief as the scale of the tragedy became clear. An autopsy conducted in Bangalore concluded that Junior had died from sudden cardiac arrest, a finding later supported by a second autopsy in Brazil requested by his family. Investigators found no evidence that the collision itself had directly caused his death, though debates about the incident continued for years. Complaints alleging negligence were filed against multiple parties, including organizers and medical personnel, while scrutiny of the emergency response remained intense. For Indian football, the tragedy became impossible to ignore. Junior's death forced the sport to confront uncomfortable questions about player safety, emergency planning, and medical preparedness. Over time, it helped drive significant improvements, including stricter requirements for on-site doctors, emergency response teams, defibrillators, and formal hospital arrangements for major matches. Dempo retired his number 10 shirt, and supporters continued to remember him as a hard-working striker who traveled halfway across the world in search of opportunity and found success far from home. His story remains one of football's cruelest ironies. Georgi Asparuhov. In Bulgaria, the death of Georgi Asparuhov was not merely the loss of a footballer, it was a national trauma that shook even the communist regime that governed the country. Nicknamed Gundi, he was born on the 4th of May, 1943, in Sofia, and died on the 30th of June, 1971, at age 28 in a car crash at the Vytinya Pass. Asparuhov was a prolific striker renowned for his technique, heading, finishing, pace, vision, and elegance, often called the artist for his graceful style. He is widely regarded as one of Bulgaria's greatest ever footballers, voted the best of the 20th century by Bulgarians ahead of Hristo Stoichkov, a Ballon d'Or nominee who finished 8th in 1965, and was later ranked among the top players of the century by the IFFHS. After starting at Levski Sofia and a successful spell at Botev Plovdiv, where he helped win a cup and starred in European competition, he returned to Levski, scoring roughly 150 league goals and winning 3 Bulgarian league titles and 3 cups, and was named Bulgarian Footballer of the Year in 1965. Internationally, he earned 49 caps, appearing at 3 World Cups, and is remembered for scoring Bulgaria's first ever World Cup goal, and for a legendary solo goal against England at Wembley in 1968, gliding past defender after defender. European giants like Benfica and AC Milan pursued him relentlessly, but he stayed loyal to Levski under communist restrictions, embodied in a famous quote attributed to him about being born in his team and dying in it. He was equally celebrated for his gentlemanly conduct and fair play. His death is wrapped in legend. On the 28th of June, 1971, Asparuhov played in a heated Sofia derby, was targeted with rough play, retaliated, received a red card and was suspended. Invited to a former club's anniversary event, he set off driving his Alfa Romeo with his friend and fellow forward Nikola Kotkov. They picked up a hitchhiker, and minutes later on the winding, dangerous Vitinia Pass. In the Balkan Mountains, their car collided head-on with a truck and caught fire, killing all 3 instantly. It was ruled a tragic accident exacerbated by the road, conditions and possible speeding. Conspiracy theories of murder or regime involvement have circulated, for decades common in such high-profile deaths under communism, but the evidence strongly supports an accident, and his spontaneous trip made any premeditation unlikely. What followed was extraordinary. The joint funeral in Sofia drew massive crowds, with estimates ranging into the hundreds of thousands, one of the largest spontaneous gatherings in Bulgarian history. It so unsettled the communist regime, which feared unrest, that authorities reportedly tore down some obituaries. His legacy is woven into the fabric of the nation. Levski. Sofia's stadium bears his name. A street in Sofia is named after him. Monuments have been erected, and a 2024 biographical film told his story. Gerd Müller called his death an incomparable disaster in Bulgarian football, and tributes from Eusebio and Bobby Charlton spoke to his class. He remains more than half a century on, a symbol of talent, loyalty, and lost potential. Rommel Fernandez. For the small football nation of Panama, Rommel Fernandez was a pioneer and a hero, the player who proved that a boy from a humble neighborhood could conquer European football. His full name was Rommel Fernandez Gutierrez, born on the 15th of January 1966, and he is widely regarded as one of Panama's greatest talents and the second Panamanian to play in Europe. Born in the El Carrillo neighborhood of Panama City, Fernandez began with local clubs like Plaza Amador and Atletico Panama before his performances for the national team caught the attention of Spanish clubs during a 1986 trip to Spain for an emigrants tournament. In 1987, at 21, he signed with CD Tenerife, where he became a key player, scoring a career-high 18 goals in his second season to help secure promotion to La Liga. His powerful, bullish style earned him the nickname El Panzer, and his goals kept coming season after season. He was named Best South American Player in the Spanish League in 1989-90 and won the Trofeo Ife as the Best Ibero-American Player the following year. He transferred to Valencia in 1991, but saw limited minutes as a backup, and in 1992-93 he was loaned to Albacete, where he helped the club preserve its La Liga status in only their second top-flight season and scored 7 league goals, including his 50th in La Liga, fittingly against his former club Tenerife. Across his career, he managed around 104 La Liga games and 32 goals, a remarkable haul for a pioneer from a footballing minnow he earned. Caps for Panama from 1986 until 1992, his final international appearance, coming in a heavy World Cup qualifying defeat to Costa Rica. On the 6th of May 1993, at just 27 years old, Fernandez died in a car accident just outside Albacete. After a team meal with his Albacete teammates in the village of Tinajeros, he was driving back when he lost control of his car on a slope, crashing into a tree. He suffered a severe head injury and was rushed to the Hospital General de Albacete, but died from complications including respiratory arrest. His cousin, who was a passenger, survived unharmed. Reports described Fernandez as joyful beforehand, with no indications of foul play or other external factors. It was simply a tragic loss of control. The site of the crash has since become a place of pilgrimage for fans who leave flowers annually. His death was a profound blow to both Panamanian and Spanish football in a fitting and lasting tribute. Panama's national stadium in Panama City was renamed the Estadio Rommel Fernández Gutiérrez in his honor shortly afterward. It serves to this day as the home of the Panama national team and Tauro FC, holding tens of thousands of fans after renovations. He remains a symbol of Panamanian footballing excellence, remembered fondly by the fans of Tenerife, Valencia, and Albacete alike. Even decades later, his former clubs continue to mark the anniversaries of his passing, honoring the pioneer and goalscorer who put Panama on the European football map before his life was cut tragically short. Ray Jones. Ray Jones. Ray Jones was supposed to be the future at Queen's Park Rangers. They whispered that he might be their answer to Wayne Rooney. Instead, his story became one of the most painful what-ifs in English football. He was a highly promising English striker, born on the 28th of August 1988 in East Ham, London, who died on the 25th of August 2007 at age 18, 3 days before his 19th birthday in a car crash. Jones was born and raised in East Ham, rejected by Colchester United as a youth. He impressed at QPR and joined their youth setup around age 15, progressing quickly with his raw talent, strength, pace, and aerial ability. He made his professional debut as a substitute in April 2006 and broke out the following season under manager John Gregory. He scored his first goal in the League Cup against Northampton Town and added league goals against Hull City, Southampton, and Cardiff City, finishing with 6 goals across 37 appearances in all competitions. His performances drew genuine interest from bigger clubs, with Derby County reportedly bidding nearly £6 million for him, and a teammate. He signed a new contract to stay and develop. Fans adored not just his ability, but his humility, famously taking the tube home alongside supporters. He was seen as a symbol of a brighter future for the club, and he had even earned one appearance for England's under-19 team. In the early hours of the 25th of August 2007, Jones was driving a black Volkswagen Golf in High Street South, East Ham, when he collided head-on with a double-decker bus. He had passed his driving test only 23 days earlier. The crash killed Jones and 2 of his passengers, both 17 years old. One of them, Idris Olasupo, had received a letter that very day inviting him to Fulham's academy. A heartbreaking detail that only deepened the sense of wasted promise. There were 5 people in the car in total, with the other 2 injured, one of them seriously. QPR postponed their match against Burnley as the club and the wider football community fell into mourning. It was the second major tragedy to strike QPR in around 15 months following the murder of youth player Kiyan Prince at the inquest. The following April, the coroner ruled Jones's death accidental, though his driving had fallen far below expected standards, with the car having sped over a pedestrian crossing on the wrong side of the road. Had he survived, he would have faced 2 charges of causing death by dangerous driving over the deaths of his passengers, who were recorded as unlawfully killed. QPR retired his number 31 shirt, and players wore shirts bearing his name in a subsequent match. Tributes flowed from fans, teammates, and managers like Ian Holloway. The London press reported the loss of the QPR striker killed in a car crash with a heavy heart. His story remains a haunting reminder of how quickly footballing promise and young lives can be taken away. Federico Pisani at Atalanta, they called him the Little Prince. Federico Chico Pisani was a promising Italian forward, born on the 25th of July, 1974, known for his agility, technical skill, dribbling, and ability to change a game, a beloved product of one of Italy's finest youth academies, whose life was cut short in a car crash at just 22. Born in Castelnuovo di Garfagnana in Tuscany, the son of a plumber, Pisani came from a modest background and joined Atalanta's youth setup around the age of 15, arriving from an affiliated club after a brief, unsettled earlier stint with Torino. In Atalanta's highly regarded academy, often considered the best in Italy at the time, he was coached by Cesare Prandelli in the Primavera team and contributed to youth championship successes, sharing dressing rooms with future stars like Alessio Tacchinardi and Domenico Morfeo. He made his Serie A debut on the 15th of March 1992 at just 17, and over his career with the club recorded 64 league appearances and 6 goals, with a loan spell at Monza in Serie B in between. Despite his small stature, he was prized for his flair, scoring memorable goals against Fiorentina and Roma, and he played under managers, including Marcello Lippi and Emiliano Mondonico. After a knee ligament injury cost him about 6 months, he was returning strongly in the 1996-97 season. He was seen as a potential future Italy striker and a particular favourite of the Curva Nord. On the night of the 11th into the 12th of February 1997, during the Carnival period, Pisani was driving his BMW convertible back from an evening at the Casino di Campione d'Italia. He was with his girlfriend, Alessandra Midali, who was also killed, and 2 friends who survived. The crash occurred in the early hours on the A8 Milan Lakes motorway, when the car swerved off the road and slammed into a pillar. Possible factors discussed in reports included high speed, mechanical issues, distraction, or fatigue, but no single definitive cause was established beyond the tragic accident itself. Both Pisani and Midali died. The news shattered Atalanta and the city of Bergamo. His funeral in the Bergamo Duomo drew around 4,000 mourners, including players like Christian Vieri and Paolo Montero, his teammates who had been training and changing alongside him only the day before, struggled to even comprehend the loss. The British press reported simply that the promising forward had been killed in a car crash. Atalanta's response was immediate and lasting. They retired his number 14 shirt and the Curva Nord at their stadium was named in his honor, the Curva Pisani, while the main pitch at their training center also bears his name in the emotional match that followed his death. Players ran to the Curva where a number 14 shirt was displayed, and banners bid goodbye to Chico, asking him to say hello to the stars for them. Decades later, on anniversaries, Atalanta and their fans continue to honor him. A youth tournament in his home region of Garfagnana bears his name, and Christian Vieri remembered him in his autobiography. He is forever the little prince of Atalanta, a joyful, gifted player whose career ended far too soon. Ludo Koch. Ludo Koch was, in his day, the glamour of Belgian football personified, a midfielder of elegance and flair, whose blistering left foot and charismatic personality made him one of the brightest stars of his era. His full name was Ludovic Koch, and he was renowned for his elegance, powerful left-footed shots, technique, vision, and versatility. Born on the 25th of September 1955 in Berchem, Antwerp. He died on the 9th of October 1985 at the age of 30. Koch became a key player at RSC Anderlecht, debuting in November 1972 in a star-studded squad featuring the likes of Rob Rensenbrink and Francois van der Elst, having been scouted as a teenager by the legendary coach Raymond Goethals. Despite recurring injuries, he amassed a glittering trophy haul, including Belgian league titles, multiple Belgian Cups, the European Cup Winners' Cup in 1976 and 1978, and the UEFA Cup in 1983, playing a key role in that UEFA Cup final against Benfica. He played around 292 league games and scored 54 goals for Anderlecht, excelling in roles ranging from attacking midfielder to sweeper, and forming strong partnerships with the likes of Ari Hahn and Juan Lozano. A move to Inter Milan in 1983, just weeks after the UEFA Cup win, was undermined by injuries and limited play, and a subsequent loan at Ascoli brought no appearances at all. At the time of his death, he was reportedly about to sign with Lierse to revive his career. Internationally, Koch earned 46 caps and 4 goals for Belgium between 1974 and 1984. At the 1982 World Cup in Spain, he played all 5 games, famously scoring a long-range goal against El Salvador and marking Diego Maradona out of the match against Argentina. He was described as a complete and versatile midfielder, a crowd favorite at Anderlecht, nicknamed Koekoek, the Cuckoo, and known off the pitch as the first glamour boy of Belgian football, a bon vivant who lived life fully. In 1985, in a gesture that captured his spirit, he recorded a benefit single for Ethiopian famine relief. The end came on a rain-soaked road. On the 7th of October 1985, after appearing on a TV sports program in Brussels, Koch was driving his BMW back to Antwerp on the rain-soaked motorway near Rumst, when he lost control due to aquaplaning in a bend and crashed into the crash barriers. He suffered severe injuries, including a ruptured liver and a cerebral hemorrhage, fell into a coma, and died 2 days later on the 9th of October at a hospital in Idegem. He had only just turned 30. His death shocked Belgian and European football, and Anderlecht and the national team community mourned deeply. The club's own retrospectives still relive the story of one of their greats. Posthumously, he was honored in Anderlecht's all-time teams, and a stadium in Berchem was named after him. His memorial endures among those who remember him decades later. Much of his personal life remains private in the major records, but what is remembered is vivid. A charismatic, lively talent, whose career was repeatedly interrupted by injury, who earned the bittersweet nickname Man of Glass, and who died far too young on a treacherous Belgian motorway, leaving behind the memory of a player who lived as brilliantly as he played. Our final story is perhaps the most unusual and, in its way, one of the most heartbreaking, because Stefan Petrovski never even got to make his competitive debut. He was an 18-year-old Australian-Malaysian goalkeeper who died on the 1st of May 2016 after being struck by lightning during a training session nearly a month earlier. Petrovski, of Serbian and Malaysian heritage, grew up in the Forest Lodge area of Sydney's inner west and played as a promising young goalkeeper for Sydney Olympic in Australia's National Premier League. He was described as dedicated, hard-working, humble, respectful, jovial and ambitious, someone who wanted to be the best goalkeeper in the country. He obtained Malaysian citizenship through his mother and signed a 3-year professional contract with Malacca United to advance his career, fitting the club's local player quota. He had not yet made his competitive debut, but he was seen as having strong potential, drawing interest from figures like former Socceroo Scott Ollerenshaw, with Football Federation Australia noting high hopes for him as a possible international. In early April 2016, during training at Hang Jebat Stadium in Malacca, lightning struck near the goalposts where Petrovski and a teammate were standing. Amid rainy conditions toward the end of the monsoon season, Petrovski lost consciousness immediately. A second player, 21-year-old Mohamed Afik Azouan, was also struck but recovered after treatment. Petrovski was rushed to hospital where he remained in a coma, suffering from cardiac arrest leading to brain damage from oxygen deprivation, a condition known as hypoxic ischemic encephalopathy, ultimately treated at Putra Specialist Hospital. He showed some early signs of recovery but deteriorated and died on the 1st of May after nearly a month in hospital. His father, Marko Petrovski, for whom Stefan was an only son, and by his own account a best friend, pursued justice for years. The allegations against the club and officials were serious. Failure to stop training despite increasing rain and lightning risk, no doctor present, a lack of defibrillators, and inadequate emergency response. Marko even alleged obstruction when trying to access the training site. In a landmark ruling in June 2025, the Malacca High Court ruled in favor of the family, ordering the club to pay nearly 700,000 ringgit, broken down into damages for loss of dependency, a sum for failure to insure him, and legal costs, with the judge emphasizing the duty of care and the failures in emergency response. But perhaps Petrovski's most enduring legacy is a document that bears his name. Professional Footballers Australia, working with Marco, produced a 20-page report titled Stefan's Law, analysing player safety protocols for lightning events, especially relevant in lightning-prone Southeast Asia. It recommended better policies, training suspension guidelines, and medical readiness, and it was endorsed by the Global Players Union FIFPro and pitched toward FIFA for worldwide adoption. Tributes came from Sydney Olympic Football NSW, the AFC, and many others, all mourning his passing and honouring his character. A young man who dreamed of being his country's best goalkeeper became in death the catalyst for a safety standard that may one day save another player's life. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed watching this video, click on one of the boxes playing on your screen